Welcome everybody to today's podcast covering fundamentals of securing the cloud. This podcast is the first in a series of cloud security podcasts and will provide an overview of the cloud security best practices across all your different cloud platforms. Upcoming podcasts will focus on deeper diving into the security specific requirements for cloud services such as Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Office 365 and more. My name's Don Cornish and I'm a security solution architect with Dewpoint.
And I'm Rich Benoit, the Senior Cloud and Infrastructure Architect with Dewpoint.
Together we'll be presenting today's topic, Fundamentals of Securing the Cloud.
Yeah, so Don, one of the common things that I see amongst customers is they see their users with a credit card going to AWS and Azure and those types of things, and they don't think that's their responsibility. But I would argue that it's something that IT is still responsible for the data.
That's right, Rich. If we go back to the fundamentals of any good security program, we have the Confidentiality, Integrity Triad, or the CIA Triad as it's more commonly known. And those fundamentals still apply whether we're in the cloud or whether in a traditional on-prem or whether we're in a hybrid environment of both on-prem and cloud for it. So just to recap for people who may not be quite as familiar about it, what those three parameters are or principles are: confidentiality. That's to ensure that the data is not available to unauthorized individuals, programs, entities. It works on the principle of least privilege, which means basically only those entities or those people that need to get access to the data have access to the data, and they have access at the right level, so it's controlled. The integrity objective is to ensure that the accuracy and completeness of the data is maintained throughout its life cycle so that people can actually trust what they're reading and seeing and getting back through their IT infrastructure and systems. And availability, of course, is around ensuring that the data is available as and when needed. So there are our three fundamental philosophies from a security perspective that we really want to maintain and should understand no matter where our data is being processed.
Yeah, that's right. So in a traditional environment, we often see an exterior perimeter already established. So you have an external firewall, maybe a DMZ, internal firewall. These are physical devices that provide a really significant protection to an existing data center. So the internal issues that you might run into, like user management, application security, network security, misconfigured devices, all those kinds of things are protected behind this perimeter, so that the users are not actually exposed to the internet itself.
That's right, Rich. And so, when we move into a cloud environment, there's I would say a bit of a misconception that, hey, we don't need to worry about security. And so that sort of begs the question, why is cloud security critical? Well, if we look at the research through the various research entities like Gartner and others for it, what they've come back and actually uncovered is that on average, most organizations, an average organization that's running its infrastructure as a service in the cloud could have anywhere around up to or even greater than 14 misconfigured parameters in that infrastructure. And what that, of course, means is that those entities are potential areas at which breaches and malicious actors are able to gain access, unauthorized access into that environment.
Right, and it's like I was talking before. In an existing environment, those misconfigurations aren't as important because they're behind this perimeter. But like we're saying, when you have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service in the cloud, if you're misconfigured, you are very potentially available to the internet directly. So the user management, the application security, network security are all very important to make sure that you configure them right, and so that they aren't being presented to the internet.
That's right, Rich. And so particularly if we start looking at things like software as a service, such as Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, etc., nearly all those environments are directly accessible directly from the internet. And the challenge that organizations are faced with is depending on the level of maturity of the organization, if they adopt the basic out-of-the-box configuration from the vendors, they may not actually align with the security requirements of that organization. So it's really important for an organization to understand what they're getting directly from the provider, and does that align to their security requirements and their security paradigms.
Right, that's right, Don. So a lot of times we'll see is the cloud providers make consuming their services very easy. So it's very easy to spin up a VM in AWS, but your SSH might be directly accessible from the internet. Same goes for like Office 365, where out of the box it's very simple, but you don't have any multi-factor authentication or any of those kinds of things. So the cloud providers give you simple services to use, but that doesn't mean that they're protected.
That's right, Rich, and that's not to say that they don't make them available. In most cases, what we see with the major cloud providers of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, they actually have a massive infrastructure capability available. However, organizations need to be aware of that and then make the decisions as to what they're going to subscribe to. So some fundamentals that we actually would advise organizations to look at is understand what does your cloud provider do natively out of the box and what can be added on through their services. Because what we're finding is that the services that a cloud provider will make available are integrated or more easily integrated into the total service offering than perhaps trying to do a bolt-on. So certainly understanding what you're going to be responsible for, who's going to provide it, whether it's coming from the cloud provider environment or whether it's coming from you actually putting your tools and processes over the top is fundamentally important. What we also see is that as you move across the compute environment and the architecture for it, we've got things like an on-prem environment, which is owned by the client or the customer. Then we can move through infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. What we find is that different people have different expectations and different understandings of roles and responsibilities. On-prem, a client is in control of their physical security, the hosting, the infrastructure, network, applications, all the way up the stack. As we move across in the infrastructure and platform, those demarcs, let's call them, actually change significantly. So that as you move across to software as a service, you'll actually find that your cloud provider is the one who's going to be in control of your physical security, the hosting infrastructure, because they're providing the software and the OS that it runs on. Network, they're going to be controlling that within their data center, etc. And quite often what you'll find is it's not until you get up to the data level for it that you find the accountability and the control actually resides primarily then with the customer or the client. Right. So those fundamentals of understanding what is offered and where the protection comes in is critical for a successful migration and operational experience in the cloud.
Yeah, so a great example of that is you can get a VM from Amazon, Azure, or Google, and it might be HIPAA or PCI compliant up through that VM, but then you as the customer are still responsible for that last mile.
Yep, that's right, Rich. So that's why it's key for organizations to have a good understanding of the whole stack and who is accountable and responsible for ensuring the total protection and security paradigm within that environment.
Yeah. So given that, that's kind of the problem statement that cloud services are easy to consume, easy to use, but out of the box, they don't come with a lot of security. So one of the things that we want to do is provide that additional layers of security that a traditional data center might have in a cloud environment. So some of the things around that would be having a secure perimeter for your AWS environment. So there's still a firewall and those types of things built in to protect the cloud environment. Or if you're using a SaaS offering, provide the right level of configuration to provide that heightened level of security that you're used to. So some of the things that Dewpoint does around that is we actually have our own community cloud where we provide that external perimeter and clients only need to provision within their secure pod in our environment. So we have fixed pricing, very simple environment, but very secure and very usable. Another thing that we can do is help with providing that VPC, so the virtual private cloud as a service, so that that you have the security perimeter in your AWS or your Azure environment to protect it. The next thing that we offer is something that you'll be very familiar with, the CISO as a service, being able to help define the policies and those types of things that an organization needs to successfully utilize the cloud. Also security as a service, where we can do a lot of that, the things that you're going to talk about later for customers. And then finally, we have managed services that we have for your SaaS offering. So for Office 365, to help you with your user management, make sure that the right configuration settings are in place and that it's hardened appropriately for your organization.
That's right, Rich. And if we look at again, back at some of the industry research, what we've seen from Gartner is that a prediction that they made that was in 2018 that 60% of enterprises that implement appropriate cloud visibility and cloud controls are going to have anywhere up to 33% fewer security failures, which is a great position to be in, so that you're actually reducing your risk footprint in your organization and still getting the benefits of being in a cloud environment. So if we look at some of the key security areas that should be considered, just to name a few, and there's quite a large list of them, but the ones that I would be recommending that organizations at least understand is, you can expect that your cloud provider is going to provide you with the physical security. However, when you start to get into things like identity and access management, that could be a blended environment or a blended responsibility for it. Things like threat and vulnerability management, they still need to take place whether you're in an on-prem or in a cloud environment. So they're just some of the areas that we're going to be covering in our next podcast for it. So I hope you found that this one is of interest. If you want more details of it, please contact us at dewpoint.com or email us at sales@dewpoint.com. Thanks very much for listening.